All right, we're live. Hello. Welcome everybody to another online series of Mygration Festival. I am really happy to introduce you all to MaiThu Bui, and also very excited to share her art piece with you all today. This piece was meant to be a VR art piece that was going to be featured at the festival in March, but because of the pandemic, we had to reschedule things. And yeah, you've been able to create this piece into something else. And I'm really, really excited to be able to amplify this narrative on #migration because it is one from a viet-german perspective. And also because you're an activist and also a philosopher, an art student, and many, many other things. I do believe that, yeah, you're able to understand how art is a medium for an unspoken language. And Bame is a visual art piece that I hope viewers today will really just embrace feelings rather than trying to understand a lot of things, because there are a lot of elements for one, and yeah, we'll get into that. But also maybe reflecting on how history shapes current narratives is something also very important. But yeah, MaiThu, would you like to share anything before we show the art piece, or maybe trigger warnings?
Trigger warnings are definitely there. So I want to warn you that there might be sensitive situations which you are always free to, exit, of course. And Bamea is a video that is more rather like a trailer for my memory box. The memory box is not a box. It's just a format that has different outputs that I think would suit the audience better by exchanging with them what they would like to see. Like I asked my parents, for example, what is the format that you would like to see or to visit in a way, so that we could talk about it or so. Yeah. Thanks, Vicky. Thanks for having me. And I'm happy to have this kind of premiere online, at home, safe.
Yeah, everybody's safe. That's what we like. Alrighty, so without further ado, I'm going to share the art piece with you all. Okay. Thank you so much for sharing such a powerful piece with us. I also want to be able to open up the discussion to the viewers here today, so feel free to use the chat section for questions or even comments. We'd love to have some kind of interaction in these days where we have to isolate ourselves. But yeah, I have a lot of questions, as you know, but yeah, we'll see if we can get through them all. And one is that this is something that I think about a lot, but in the beginning of the clip, you mentioned how your parents had fled post-war Vietnam in search for a better life, and you then included that you now have because you had to run away from neo-Nazis in your hometown, Plauen in Saxony, you now have a pigeon phobia. Do you maybe want to talk about the utopia that might be placed on European countries?
Yeah, thank you for the question. It's, I think, also like not only a utopian that is only being told in European, it's also the way even family members in Vietnam perceived my parents, that, you know, it would be enough for them to migrate to Germany, that they have a job and earn more money than they would in Vietnam. And so this is one of kind of the illusion they had. And years after, my family members understood what truly happened, because my parents opened up about their condition, of because there were moments where they had to save their face and didn't want to worry their family members, of course. So this was a big issue in my family as well. And whenever I talk about it with my aunt, for example, she tears up. She also is in the video. And the other thing also would be that when I worked in the NGO with mostly middle class, white, German students who have certain privileges that others don't have, also who grew up in Western Germany, I felt like there was no understanding of, you know, what people in Eastern Germany truly experience and how they grew up. And of course, I moved to Bavaria at a very young age as well, but I grew up in that time when neo-Nazis were at my doorstep, where we had to run away from them, where I have had friends whose family members and sisters and brothers were in like foster homes because there was domestic violence. Their parents were, as my parents, unemployed after the unification. And so, you know, there is a certain history that comes with extremism, and xenophobia was always there. It's not something that just, you know, came around the corner and came out of the blue. And I think those terms like rising and uprising movements, I think that they give the wrong idea that those things have never existed before. And so I want to change the narrative that even, you know, how we use vocabulary in a linguistic way, that it also defines how we understand history itself. And so this is maybe the utopian people live in, because they were always in their kind of comfort bubble and had never to experience those things that marginalized groups in Germany, for example, experienced. And also the illusion that, you know, what we learned in school, that Jews were only had those problems back then in those history classes at that certain time. That's not true. Like Jewish communities experience racism until today, and even in Berlin, even where we live, and it's not something that has disappeared just because our history books tells us that.
Yeah, and like you did allude to the fact that it's like saving face and also just trying to deal with the things that are really difficult to deal with on everyday life, that maybe sometimes it's unspoken. And also in your clip, you spoke about how you, as the next generation being born here, now are the ones who not only have to like look after your parents and their pension and things like this, but also tell their narrative. Do you have an idea of why for yourself and for your parents, why they don't want to publicly talk about it themselves?
I think this question is very complex, and the answers to that are something I cannot answer. You know, I just can attempt to answer them. So what I experienced, first of all, there is and was no platform for my parents to speak about it. So I think, like, you know, how do messages go through? No one asked them. I was asking them. But I think at that time when I was a child, I couldn't truly grasp, you know, what my parents were telling me. And also they would simplify the information because of language barrier, because of, you know, assuming that I wouldn't understand the whole history and stuff like that. And so when I was a kid, I was searching for it in books. I lived literally in the library, and I read war books, but there was nothing about the Vietnam War, for example. I just knew that there was a Vietnam War because it was, you know, spoken about in television. And whenever my teachers or someone would ask me where I would come from, and I would tell them, yeah, my parents come from Vietnam, they would tell me, oh yeah, the Vietnam War. Or yeah, in East Germany, there were a lot of Vietnamese people, but they would never, you know, elaborate on that further. And so I was always like in this kind of huge question mark bubble. I couldn't answer myself. You know, access to Wi-Fi didn't exist back then, and all those kind of websites you could look up on those things like today didn't exist. So I was always on the search. And then I think I also gave up at some point during puberty to ask my parents about this, because I developed other interests, which when I think back now, is actually kind of an extension to trying to understand who I am, where my family comes from. Because when I was 14, I started to look more into psychology, neurology, and understand, you know, the human being, because I had this kind of eager necessity to understand them. And, you know, encyclopedias wouldn't give me that information because there was always like a short caption about Vietnam. And my parents somehow couldn't give me that answer. And I think what I usually told my friends now is that I thought that my parents needed some time to think about this, but I truly thought about that even longer. And I think, yes, for sure, some parents needed some time and still need. I know friends whose parents don't speak about those pasts because of the traumas or because it's uncomfortable. My mom, for example, told me that I wasn't allowed to ask my grandparents about the Vietnam War. So even that, you know, was kind of a blockage. But when I think about this, my mom always told me everything I would ask her, she would answer it in her way. And everything I asked my father, he would answer me. Like, I talked to him yesterday and he was like, no, I have no problem telling you those things. And because I was also asking him, are there any questions that are sensitive and you know, feel uncomfortable with me asking you? And he was like, no. I even told that my sister, and she was like, oh, that's so dad. And my mom, she loves talking. She loves to, you know, tell stories. And she always tells me that I'm a matching partner for conversation because I'm usually listening to her. And so I thought about that again. And I think that it's some sort of structuralism, how we were educated in Germany, that the ways we communicate didn't match the ways my parents communicated. I mean, I figured that out very early, but I didn't knew what that means. So I think now I can see it as me not being able to understand, for example, the Vietnamese vocabulary back then, to connect it to historic events, because no one would tell me about historic events. No one, like, I couldn't, you know, puzzle it together in my brain. And also there was no community or people in my age who I could talk to about this, which I have now, and I'm very happy about this, because it helps me a lot to understand my parents and myself. And we share a lot of, you know, even small anecdotes. And I think this is like the very complex layering of how and why the voices of my parents are not being heard, and also why they don't think that someone would listen to them, because my aunt, for example, she was like, she came here on New Year's Lunar New Year. It was like, MaiThu, I have to say, I'm so surprised that you and your sister are interested in your family's history, because I thought when your parents moved to Germany and you grew up in Germany and were raised and educated in Germany, you know, everything that connects you to Vietnam was something that you were not interested in. And I think that was also a thing that my mom never told her, that I was asking all those questions. So now that I'm doing videos on the history, it's something that has a certain purpose, and my aunt can also understand that there's, you know, a why and for what I'm asking those questions. Yeah, I think.
Yeah. I mean, it's also like, even now that we've showed this piece and now that it will be posted publicly, it could also be like a source of history for those who still aren't being like given the information that they perhaps need, that they can connect with also. And this is something I think is really, really important, because there are so many small elements that play up narratives and to understand oneself. And like, for example, your father and having this memory, like with your memory box and everything, and there was this element within it that has now changed. That was featured in the video, and that is the German Vietnamese dictionary. And before that, that was like a really important part of your memory box. But with time and as we speak more, these memories change, and we also connect in a different way through them. And maybe you want to tell a little bit more about the funny story of the German dictionary translated into Vietnamese.
So my dad has a very dry sense of humor. I mean, yeah, so there was this thing that for like many years he was looking for a certain viet-german dictionary. And so I figured out that must be something that's very important to him, and we couldn't find it. And he always thought that my uncle would have it or someone else, and you know, that I lost it while I was moving. But I was like, no, I've never seen that before, I don't know. And then I found it in, you know, his collection of documents, which is here over there. And there were also like some books which are here in this small corner. He saved as some form of memory or proof. I think we will go into that later. And so I just found, I think I can show it, that he wrote in there that he was working on that. And I thought like, oh, dang, you know, those Germans, they discredited him, and such a shame, dang. And then I asked him, I was like, Dad, I found your dictionary, brought it to Berlin, and yeah, I you know, I stumbled upon something. Can I ask you about it? He was like, yeah, just go on. And I was, you know, telling him that that I was asking, when did he work on that dictionary, and why didn't they credit him for his work? And he was like, no, I did that for fun. You know, it's something like fancy people do with their books. They write ex libris, this Latin kind of sentence in there to show that this book belongs to a certain person. And so he just, well,
Let's do it.
I don't think it's some form of impostering or anything. I just think, you know, he has certain humor. His belongings, he identified them himself with translating, and I mean, he later became a translator. So yeah. What? And I think, you know, he had always this ambition to educate himself, and he's a sponge. He knows so much, and he can remember exact dates and weekdays. And so educating himself was always a very important thing.
Yeah.
Because yeah, also another story to that, but I will probably tell that another time. But
yeah,
now,
I mean, we can see this big pile of documents behind you, and you also included it in the video. there were legal documents that, you know, this, I think it's not a history that's told to a lot of people, but like for contract workers, they had to choose between abortion or going back to their country when they fell pregnant. And like these documents are just not really publicly shared or featured anywhere. So I was really happy, well, not happy, but just amazed to see something like this, and how powerful it is. And why do you think it was so important for him to collect all these documents, and also why was it important for you to include it in BAME?
I mean, I once asked him why he knows exact dates and weekdays, and I think that's unusual and something very special. And he was just answering that, you know, some people are not interested in that. I'm interested in that. And so, yeah, I cannot answer from his perspective on a more elaborative way, but I personally see it as, you know, some sort of proof that he experienced those things, because why would he keep those documents about unemployment, about rejection of, you know, permanent stay? Why would he, you know, save all those letters and those CVs they had to write? And why would he do that? Those are the questions I'm asking myself, and I'm also asking my parents. And you know, I think they haven't thought about this. They just did it in a way. And my father's also a not very personal person. Like he prefers to speak about events and historic events and happenings, and to teach me. Like he very enjoyed to teach me Vietnamese back in university. He thought it was funny. Yeah, my dad is a very funny person, but very subtle funny person. And so yeah, I just see it as that. And I'm very thankful that he saved it so that I can understand him and my parents better.
Yeah, I mean, there were just so many things in this video that I think have a huge meaning to your parents and to yourself. And another one was that, like you mentioned, how your mother gave you sunflowers for your birthday every year and still does. And and you also featured the August 1992 Rost, Rostock-Lichtenhagen racist attacks, where they set on fire the so-called Sonnenblumenhaus. Well, is there an attachment to that symbolism when she gave you sunflowers for your birthday?
Yes, and because the sunflower symbolized my birthday for me throughout, you know, growing up, because since my first birthday, and I have pictures from my first birthday, which was in August 92, where there was a huge bunch of sunflowers. And it always connected me to my birthday. And I know that throughout, you know, around my birthday, there were many racist motivated attacks on asylum housings and working housings of, you know, marginalized groups. And so when I discovered that historic event, it did something, not only on, you know, on that level that racism was so near again, because when I moved to Bavaria later, I wouldn't see neo-Nazis like I did when I went to school in Plauen. And so it brought back all those, you know, memories and those black dressed groups that were passing by my window. And my mom would always tell me not to look at them because my eyes were too big, and if they would see me, they would, you know, attack us and something like this. So this was one of those moments when my mom told me that I realized what fear was, because before that I was fearless. And she yeah, I think this racist attack is something that connects me to also my birth, and it just symbolizes a very complex emotion that I cannot put in one sentence, I think, and no one can.
Yeah, I mean, sunflowers for me, like they symbolize so much joy and sunshine and warmth and things like this. But of course, within this context, it's such a heavy thing. But like, thankfully, no one lost their lives in this attack. But it's just also like a symbol for you continuing surviving and doing this, what you do so well here in Berlin, Germany. And I think that's really beautiful. And talking about life and things like this, there was also a transition into some footage that you shared, and I think it was in Vietnam. It was a very emotional scene of your grandmother's funeral, so I believe that you shared with me. And maybe you want to elaborate why you decided to also include this in this clip?
Because it's one of those stories that my mom always told me. And then again, she was always saying, but I don't want to think about that further. And I don't want to see that footage ever again. And then again, she was looking for it for me. Like I was asking her, Mom, I remember that when I was a kid, I was always looking at that footage because that was the first time I would see my family on television on a conscious level, because the first time I went to Vietnam, I was 18 months old and I can't remember that time. And so seeing my grandmother die, a person who I had no connection with on a personal level when I was 4, was something I couldn't make sense of at that young age. And I couldn't make sense of this even until today, because my family is so disconnected through that space that it's hard to have a personal connection to each family members in Vietnam. And so my mom was always telling me that she regretted that I would never meet my grandmother and my sister as well, because my sister was born a year after. And all those stories, like my aunt would tell me, she always tears up when she talks about my grandmother, for example. I always saw this kind of pain in her face that I also couldn't make sense of, because I didn't know that person. And so I just knew that, okay, it would hurt me as well if my mom would die. And this was that sort of simplification I could do at that age, right? And growing up, I always kind of revisited that footage in a way, just to see my family, because it's a 2-hour video where you would see all the people that my family members would know, the neighbors, even my grandfather and my grandmother from my father's side visited and paid tribute to the ceremony. And so this was the footage where I could see my family members, moving, not on pictures. And this kind of space that I saw there was so different from the space I would see where I was growing up in Germany, in Plauen, in Saxony. So I have a personal strong connection to that. And I mean, I said it in the video that my mom would receive the letter 3 months later, then she would receive the footage 1 year later. So so that it would be proven to her that her mother truly died. And she also told me one story that it was her birthday, and she just knew that, she had to, prepare the altar to pray to my grandmother. And my sister was baking a cake. And she was like, why is she baking a cake? And then she remembered that it's her birthday. Like she didn't knew it was her birthday. And then, she figured that years later, she figured that her mom died on the same day she was born.
Wow, so
on
heavy.
a birthday. Like it's impossible, but yeah.
Yeah, I mean, all of these elements that you included, I think they're really important for a connection to tell your narrative, and ways of you taking choosing many pieces from the memory box and placing them together. And through your art, I think, is it a sense of healing that you achieve when you create works from your memory box?
Certainly, yes. And also somehow it gives me that kind of space to explore my family's history so that I could understand my parents' personality better. That's what I think. And maybe it's just an illusion, but I just feel that way. And even for my parents, it's something to reconnect with me on that level that was lost after puberty, I think. Because my parents were like, yeah, you're studying philosophy. We don't even know what philosophy is. Is it, are you studying Confucius, or what exactly are you doing? And so my parents, after puberty, had strong difficulties to understand what I'm doing, what I'm going through. And so now that I'm revisiting our memories in a way, it also connects them to some form of medium through which we can communicate on a level that connects us emotionally. And I think this is a very important part of storytelling, because storytelling for other people is, for me, unpaid labor. Like, no one pays my parents to tell those stories. No one pays me truly to go through all this kind of stuff and then put it out there in the world. But I see it as some form of an educational responsibility, because I don't want younger peers to end up like me, to look for answers and find nothing in the libraries. And so with my parents and my sister, for example, she still has some sort of difficulties to find conversation subjects with my parents. And I know that very well. I think throughout my youth, I was doing trial and errors. My mom and I were always very chatty. With my dad, I knew that I could talk with him about history and politics. And so throughout the years, what was missing was how could I connect to them on an emotional level? And I think for example, my mother, it took her some time to, feel comfortable with herself and to be financially safer than before, so that she could free herself from those worries and stuff. And last year we had a very beautiful conversation where she said, like, I'm in my 50s now, and it's so weird that, I have these kind of moments now, so late in my life, that I can think about myself. I was never thinking about myself. I had to think about my brothers and sisters, my families, about, my family members, you guys. And so now that I think about this, I see, where I hurt you, and we hurt each other, and I don't want this to happen. And so I'm also, interested in how can we build kind of a conversation culture in which we know how and when to stop. And then it absolutely improved. Like it's not perfect, of course, but we are, working on that. My mom now even says, like, okay, I know this is a sensitive topic because, it's about time to get married and stuff, and I'm not willing to get married. She is like, okay, I think I know that it triggers you, so I will stop here. Let's talk about something else. And this is something she never did before, because when I was young, if she wanted to talk about something, she had to talk about this. And now she even respects, my boundaries, and I'm respecting her boundaries. And I think with my mom, it was always somehow also a very playful kind of mode, that we would make jokes, and I was always sarcastic. And yeah, so
nice, yeah. It's a long answer to the question,
yeah.
but it was also really interesting. I was just like, yeah, it just flowed really nicely. One thing that caught my mind was the fact that, yes, it's important to tell our narratives for other people to find them and things like this, but one part of Mygration Festival is that we tell our narratives in our own way. And before you came to this final piece of Bame that I showed, it originally didn't have any subtitles. And I think maybe we thought, oh, maybe subtitles are more important to give context for the viewers and things like this. But in the end, the way that you wanted to show it was just without subtitles and all these layerings and things like this. And what was the artistic approach for that? And what did you want people to just take away from viewing what they viewed without having the words and things like this, give them context?
I think usually at that point, I was more interested in people's reaction on an emotion level, if there would be any, because I mean, we knew that we would do a live stream and so. And of course, when I showed it to you, I realized, yeah, I cannot assume that anyone would know anything about my history. Like, that's so utopian. And I decided, I mean, we had this conversation, and so I decided to add German and English subtitles, because I assumed that the audience was non-Vietnamese speaking. And so I will upload a Vietnamese version, because I want to speak about it with my parents. And yeah, I think that's it. No deeper connection to it. I mean, when I was young, I was more into behavioral studies, and so I was, excited about experiments, and I saw this as an experiment, and then I figured, yeah, I also have a education and political agenda, so I should definitely put subtitles in there.
Definitely. I want to now open up the conversation to the viewers. I'm just going to check if there's any comments, but do you want to talk a little bit about something you're working on now, or use the platform to plug anything?
I think I'm always working on something. And I mean, this memory box project is a project which I planned for 3 years. So I don't even know whether I will ever be finished. I think it's an open archive. And in that memory box, I want to explore different forms of expression, to meet different audiences' needs, because I think it would be interesting to show some sort of format to my cousins, because I think it's different to another generation. And I talked about the medium with my parents, that I felt like when I spoke about video, that this was something they could connect with, because my dad, he watches so many documentaries on YouTube, and he really enjoys it, and he reads a lot of newspaper. But with my mom, she gets headache from reading, so reading is not an option. And I think that's also, one thing I want to explore, how not to use subtitles in order to communicate with my mom. I think it would be a voiceover. And so, yeah, it's more an experimental field I'm in right now.
I'm really excited to see what else comes out of this memory box. There's a lot of hearts in this chat section, which is beautiful. There's a dinosaur from MaiThu Bui. Is that your sister, maybe? MaiLin, is that your sister?
Yeah.
Dinosaur. And a lot of really nice messages, like it's very powerful. Thank you. I have goosebumps, and this talk is beautiful. So yeah, I'm really happy that we were able to share this piece, and I think that it's a forever going and evolving art piece that will be viewed by a lot of different people and kind of interpreted in many different ways. But I'm really happy that you shared it with us in your own way, and that we got to speak about it. So yeah, thank you for joining us here today.
No questions?
No questions. Maybe they're going to come at you on Instagram or something.
Oh, dang, I hate social media.
I love the way you do social media though. So
yeah, I think I should step into there, but I just have to find a way where I have fun with it.
Yeah. That's the only way, right? You gotta have fun with these things.
I will surprise you at some point.
Okay.
You know my Instagram stories.
I do.
Thank
you everybody for joining.
Yeah, and thank you for all the work. And I was really kind of, how you say,
rooting for us.
Rooting for you, yeah, during the pandemic. I know you went through a lot, and Are you out there? Please support Mygration Festival. It's such a beautiful and wonderful project. And Vicky is also, as you can see, a very nice person. And yeah, support this project so that one day we can do events. You guys can do events, not me.
Including wonderful artists like you. But thank you so much for making this happen online. And yeah, see you soon, I hope.
Yeah, let's do walk.